Tree School Online is a production of the OSU Forestry and Natural Resources Extension Program and the Partnership for Forestry Education. And we want to give special recognition to Clackamas Extension and OFRI for leading this project, and to the U.S. Forest Service and the Oregon Department of Forestry for providing us with a grant to cover our expenses. Tree School online webinars are scheduled the first and third Tuesday of each month at 3 p.m. from now until June 15th. And you're saying to yourself, well, this isn't the first or third Tuesday. And you're right. This is the second Tuesday. And that's because today's webinar is been rescheduled from back in October when it was going to be. So before we introduce David and Sara, I have a few housekeeping details to go over with you. I know by now most of you are familiar with Zoom, but every time we have a few new participants, and I just like to point out how it works for us, Zoom in general, and how we work Zoom. The Zoom toolbar, which should be at the bottom of your screen, has most of the tools that you will need to use today. If it's not there already, roll your cursor over it and it should come to life. Or in some hardware like an iPad, the Zoom toolbar is actually at the top and you have to touch up there and it'll come to life. But anyway, for most people, it's at the bottom. This is a webinar format, so you will not have access to audio or your video camera. Only panelists and speakers will have that. Your audio is muted and your video is turned off. The way we would like you to communicate with us is through written questions in the Q&A box. You'll notice at the bottom of your toolbar, about in the middle, there's a Q&A, and if you click on that, it allows you to write in a question. Unlike other Zoom meetings, we don't expect you to write in the chat box unless you're having technical difficulties. We mostly use the chat box to communicate with the participants, and Dan Stark from OSU Extension is manning the chat box for us today, and he'll be posting messages and some links in there that will be helpful to you as we go through. The other thing that we have for you is some resources, and these will be posted after the webinar's over on the Tree School online page under past classes. If you click on past classes, you scroll down to this one and the resource page will be there. We're going to be recording this webinar like we do all of them, and in about a week or less, the webinar will be available on the Know Your Forest and on the Tree School online web pages. Finally, we use polls in our webinars. A couple different ways we use them at the beginning to find out more about you, which really helps our presenters, and then we use them at the end to do some wrap-up questions. So in most cases, once I activate the poll, which I'll do in a few minutes after I introduce David and Sara, it'll just pop open on your screen. You click your answers and then close the poll and your answers will be registered. But in some versions of Zoom that people have, instead of the poll automatically opening up, the poll light on the toolbar will light up, and when you click on it, it'll open. And then if you have all of your pop-up blockers set to block every pop-up, you won't get the poll because Windows, they think the poll is a pop-up. So anyway, that's probably enough details on housekeeping, more than you want. So I would ask David Diaz and Sara Loreno to turn on their cameras and join us. And they are our presenters today. David is the Director of Forest Technology, and Sara is the Natural Resource Data Scientist, and they're both with Ecotrust, technically out of Portland, although I know that David is remote. He's in Seattle. So tell us what you're going to tell us, David, and then we'll take a poll.
Great. Well, we'll give you a little bit more introduction to Forest Planner, to Landmapper, excuse me. I'm showing my cards a little bit here. My name's David Diaz. I'm a director of forestry at Ecotrust. Like Mike said, I am based in Seattle. I'm also a PhD student at the University of Washington. But basically, I'm the chief forest nerd. I do a lot of forest modeling and forest mapping work at Ecotrust. And we're really excited to kind of give you a hands-on tour of a new application called Landmapper that we're launching today. Sarah?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Like Mike introduced me as, I'm the data scientist at Ecotrust. Been there around 4 years, and I am based in Portland. I do a lot of the same data nerdery and forest nerdery as David, in addition to GIS and visualization stuff. So I'm excited to introduce to you today Landmapper. So let's jump in.
All right, before we do, let's do a poll. So on your screen is the opening poll, and basically it's 3 questions. We want to know where you're from: Willamette Valley, Coastal Oregon, Southwest Oregon, Central or Eastern, Washington State, the USA, not Washington or Oregon, or outside the USA. We want to know if you're a woodland owner, private natural resource professional, an agency natural resource professional, a nonprofit natural resource professional, or other. And finally, we'd like to know how many acres do you own or manage? 0, 10 or less, 10 to 40, 40 to 100, 100 to 1,000, or over 1,000. And we already have a couple of over 1,000. So this is an awesome group already. I generally like to do this until about 60 or 80% of the people have done it or go about a minute. And we're getting towards the minute. And so far, there are 108 of you eligible to vote, and 80% have voted. So this is just like Oregon, man. You guys love voting. So welcome to Ecotrust. Welcome to Tree School Online. I'm going to end the polling there and then share with you the results so David and Sara know a little bit about you, since that's the whole reason we do this. So 69% of you are from the Willamette Valley. That's the largest. 1 from outside the USA, 4 from outside of Washington and Oregon, and 5 in Washington, about 18 in the rest of Oregon besides the Willamette Valley. So as we tend to be, we are Willamette Valley centric. In terms of who you are, 68% woodland owners, 9% private natural resource, 9% agency, 13% nonprofit, and 8 others. And in terms of acres, wow, this is a bigger acre crowd than usual. So maybe that has something to do with mapping, but our largest group is 100 to 1,000, 3 over 1,000, a few of us zeros, some 10 and 20 and 40s. But I would say this is for the acres of the typical person. This is a larger thing. So maybe that's because mapping is more important if you have a larger acreage. So Sara, I will stop sharing so you can start sharing.
Well, our first maybe snafu. I was thinking that you had the slides for David, and we're going to share those.
I do. Do you want? I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I think.
Well, no, I think there's going to be some slides that will come after the presentation or after the demonstration about what's coming next. But I can jump in now and give you a little bit more background about why we developed an application called Landmapper, and then kind of hand it off to Sara to do the live demo. So to give you a little bit of background about who we are, you've heard the Ecotrust name a few times now. Ecotrust is a nonprofit organization founded in 1994 in Portland, Oregon. We work across the Northwest, so we have folks that are up in Alaska, in Washington, and in Oregon. We've got projects that go into California as well. Basically, we like to work wherever the salmon run. That's kind of been a controlling idea about the way that we work, is that we kind of think about the places that we work based on a bioregion, concept of a bioregion, as opposed to being really stuck to kind of state boundaries and things like that. And Ecotrust is kind of motivated around this idea of what we call a natural model of development. So we have programs in food and farms, in fisheries, and Sara and I are part of the forestry team. But the basic premise there is that we want to support land management and economies that actually do a much better job of not just extracting resources and generating wealth, but actually making people and places more resilient, and sharing the bounty, of one of the most productive places on the planet. And so in the forestry team, a lot of our work there is really trying to make ecological forestry in particular, but forest management in general, more accessible. You'll see as you use any of our tools that there's not any kind of prescriptive telling you how to manage your forest or anything like that. A lot of the motivating principle for us is just providing accessible information and tools, because every landowner I've ever met, has a very great land ethic, that they're eager, to figure out what to do with it. And so Landmapper is a part of that service that we're providing for free. We came to providing Landmapper about 4 years ago. We debuted, it might even be 5 years ago now, we launched another application called Forest Planner at Tree School, at Clackamas Tree School. And Forest Planner, for those of you that haven't seen it before, is basically a scenario planning application. So you can find your property, map it out, and then you get to choose your own adventure. What happens if I manage my forest this way or that way? And if you want to go check it out, we do have another Tree School online webinar that we did about Forest Planner earlier this year. You can go check that out as well. But basically what we were running into was that most of the landowners that were getting into these classes were starting on a management plan. So they weren't yet going so far as what happens if I do this or what happens if I do that. A lot of folks were coming in just saying, I need to identify what the current conditions on my property, and talk to a forester about what some of my options are. And so a lot of the landowners that were trying to use Forest Planner were getting stuck at this mapping phase of what are the different forest types on your property. Can you get the maps and put them into a management plan? There was a real kind of gap that we were finding where a lot of folks were just trying to figure out how to make maps. And so Landmapper is intended to kind of focus kind of on this on-ramp to something like Forest Planner or to stewardship planning more generally, where what was happening was that most folks end up having to go to a dozen or more websites, sometimes going into local offices, to try to figure out how to get the tax lot maps or the aerial photos and things like that. And that's all using publicly available data. So it's something that we could make it a lot easier for everyone who's trying to get started in stewardship planning by not requiring you to spend days or weeks gathering maps. So that's the kind of underlying motivation for what we're doing. And I hope you'll enjoy getting your hands dirty. And Sarah, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, David. I get the fun part of introducing to you Landmapper. I'm going to share my screen in just a minute. And my plan is to walk you through mapping a single property and show you all the maps that result from that. We're going to have a chance after I describe this process for you all to map your own property. It's probably going to be tempting to do that while I'm talking, but you might miss something, a really important nugget. So I encourage you to kind of bear with me, and then we'll have a time for you to map your own property, and we can answer questions at that time. Feel free to post any questions you have in the Q&A menu, and I will answer them as they pop up and as there is a break. So a little bit more detail before I keeping you guys on the edge of your seat. I just wanted to kind of say that there's been a lot of synergy around this initiative. It was something that Ecotrust found was a gap a few years ago and started working on, getting these maps more accessible to landowners and forestry consultants, and found several organizations that were interested in doing the same thing. Small Woodland Owners Association and Tree Farm. And so I just wanted to call that out because they've been very influential in helping us think through what this application looks like, and just kind of seeing like, what do we need to do to kind of bridge that gap and to help landowners learn more about their property in the easiest way. With all that being said, let me share my screen and we will go to Landmapper. All right, here we are. Hopefully you guys can all see my screen. This is the Landmapper homepage. This is where you'll land when you type in the landmapper.ecotrust.org URL. Generally, it looks kind of like something you'd see in Google Maps or whatnot. On the left here, you'll have a quick description about how the tool works. Up here in the top, there's several pop-ups. Home, no matter where you are in the application, will bring you back to this home page. About gives you a little bit more detail, not nearly as much as I'm going to give you today, but just a little teaser there. And then if you ever get confused and need help navigating the website, we have this pop up here with the video that I made walking you through the whole process. So if you want to watch me do this again, that is a good spot to do so. So the way that you start is simply by entering your property address here. You can enter, you know, a city. If you don't want to enter your exact address, you can enter your exact address. I believe you can even do Latin long or zip codes. Right now, you can move this screen around and zoom in and whatnot. But to start the process, you're just going to want to enter an address. So these are the ones I commonly do. Let's go to Arch Cape on the coast here. Once you get your address in, you press go. It will bring you to that area. Now it's an interactive map. So if you typed in Arch Cape and you really wanted to go to Cannon Beach or something, you just messed up the name, you can navigate from here. And then, so here's where you just click your tax lot. You can select one or more tax lots. So say you owned this property and this property, you can just select them both. If you messed up, say you selected this one and that's not your property at all, you don't care about that one, just click on it again and it goes away. Whatever property you click on will be what the maps are created for. Yeah, that's pretty self-explanatory. So we'll just go from here. Let's say we want to map this one right here. The next thing we do is go to next. We've got our property. Name your property. So just type in here, my property. I've done that before, as you can tell. And then this is the big moment where we create our maps. It does take a minute or two. What's happening now is in the background, we're saying this is their property. Go to the soils website, go to the streams data and grab all of these maps and pull them together. So it does take a minute. That spinning bar will hopefully let you know that you're in the right spot and will let you know that something is happening on the back end. And then, well, it's still loading a little bit, of course. But once that's loaded, you'll see this first landing page. And I love this landing page. It tells you so much. It tells you your name, the name of the property that you decided on, when the report was generated, which is helpful because these data can change. So if you created up maps last year, they might be different. The public data that we're pulling from may have changed since then. So this kind of gives you an idea of how recently you've pulled these data. It calculates the number of acres within your property. Again, if you had 2 tax lots selected, it would sum up those 2 tax lots together and give you the sum of those acres. It provides the elevation range for your parcel, so it gives you the min and the max in feet. The legal description, so this is pulling from the township and range. It's like section township range. And then structural forest district, forest fire district. These are all publicly available data sets that we're just pulling from. So we say, this is where this parcel is. Tell me what structural forest district, fire district there is. Tell me what forest fire district it is. And then we show it to you here. Same with watershed name and watershed number. It looks like for this one, we didn't have zoning data. You will notice that some data sets are not entirely complete. And what will happen then is it'll just say none or not available. So I know that there's a couple places where we don't have elevation data. So if you happen to be in one of those spots, you'll see not available. We're working to have complete coverage, and we pretty much have that. But I just want to flag that there will be places where certain data items are missing. So one thing that is really cool about this is that you can download your maps into a packet. Right now we're looking at it as a web page, an HTML, something we can scroll through. But if we want to download it as a PDF, we just click this here. I do see that there's a lot of questions popping up, so I just want to make sure that everyone's on board and there's no time sensitive questions. So I'll just do a check on that.
Sarah, there is one question that didn't make it to the Q&A section, but there's some, it's a clarification question on what is that watershed number?
Okay, great question. So this is, there's 12 levels of watersheds as delineated, and they each have identification numbers. So at each level, they get more specific in detail. This probably doesn't mean much to you unless you are working with data about watersheds. But the reason that we supply it is that it can be useful in identifying like a very specific section of a larger watershed. And so, yeah, it's just that identification number that if you don't care about it, then just ignore it. But if you do care about it, then you'll probably find it pretty useful. Okay, and yeah, Dan, if you notice any other clarifying questions, feel free to just let me know and I can answer those at the time. So while that PDF is downloaded, let's go through and look at the rest of the maps. You can also jump to specific maps by clicking on these, but we're just going to take you through the journey. We're going to use the scrolling. So this looks kind of similar. It's just a bigger aerial photo of the property boundary. It also shows the neighboring tax lots, which the above map doesn't do. So you can see what the neighboring parcels look like. The aerial imagery that you see here is all of the sources you'll find at the bottom, but we pull this from an Esri map. So what they do is they pull the relatively recent aerial imagery and they do a composite. One of the questions we get a lot is what year is this imagery from? And we can't give you an exact answer to that other than probably within the last year or two. They do keep this really up to date and pretty recent, and that's why we use it. We're exploring using other imagery that we will be able to pinpoint the date. So we'll let you know, we'll keep you updated as things progress. The issue with that is sometimes you end up having more outdated imagery than if you use a service like this, which does it for you. It's kind of a passive way to get really recent imagery, but it doesn't allow us to answer that question very specifically. The next map is called a street map. In talking to some of our partners, who are tree farm certifiers or forestry consultants who are going out to visit properties, it's really helpful to have a general idea of where the property is in relation to other cities or towns, and you just find directions to get there. So like we know, our property today is in Arch Cape, and this map gives you that context. The next one is the terrain map. So this is the topography of the land. This we have been told, and we know, is really important when figuring out like what the slopes are. As we all know, the steeper the slope, the more difficult it can be to harvest trees, or if you're in a valley, just knowing what the terrain looks like can be really beneficial when planning a harvest or some sort of restoration or stewardship of your property. And so this is what that does. As you can see here, this property happens to be, there's a hill right here and a pretty steep slope. This map right here is in meters currently. Another thing pending on our list is to switch this from meters to feet. Here in America, we tend to rely on feet a little bit more, and it matches some of our other tidbits that we gave you. And say in the beginning, we used feet, so we're going to continue to do that. But right now it's in meters, so just don't get confused about that. Hopefully that should be updated within the next week or so. Okay, streams. This one's cool. This one is pulled from Oregon Department of Forestry data. And hopefully you guys are familiar with Oregon Department of Forestry, or you've heard of it, but they offer this data set that specifies generally where streams are within the state, and if they are fish bearing or if they are drinking water related, and what size they are. And depending on what size and what status of the stream, there's different management requirements that are applied to the property. So that's basically, this map is giving you an idea of the waterways on your property and if they're fish bearing, what size they are. And that'll give you an idea about what size of riparian buffers you're going to want to implement on the land. We definitely know that these data aren't exactly right. This is a statewide data set. And so if you're looking at your property, you may see like, that's not where that stream is. It's 20 feet to the west. And it's probably true. It's the best data we have at this point. So hopefully it's useful and can give you some information that'll help in planning your management. The last bit of information that we have right now is soil data. This was a big one that we heard from folks that was kind of hard to get at if you were not used to doing spatial data analysis and whatnot. So this is pulled from the soil survey. Basically what you see here are different polygons, and within them is labeled types. So you can see here, there's a couple different types of soil groupings on the property. 58D, 58E, what does that mean? Nobody knows off the top of their head. At least I don't. And so what we were finding is a lot of times this is what you'd be provided with, and it was just a little bit opaque about what to mean. So in addition to this map, we have a table here that you can look up these properties. Like 58E is skipping on, gravelly, medial, silt, loam. I know all about that clearly. And it also tells you the slopes, the area within your property that soil type consists or makes up, whether it's what type of drainage is there, the site index, and this is a Doug Fir site index, 100-year, I believe. I can double check that. The erosion hazard, and then depth to soil restrictive layer. Usually this is a number of inches to the restrictive layer, but like I said, sometimes for certain areas, we don't have all the data that we would like. So in this case, for this particular property, we don't have that bit of info. But yeah, so if you had 9 different soil types, there would be 9 different bits of table data here for you to look up. So hopefully that's helpful and gives you a little bit of information about what's going on under the ground in your property. It looks like, of course, that didn't work. You gotta love it when that happens. So I'm gonna try a different, just refresh it and go somewhere else and do a different property so I can show you the PDF. When you're making a new application, there's always kinks. We're going to be providing to you a survey link at the end of this presentation today that hopefully when you're trying this out, kicking the wheels a little bit, you can tell us what you think, tell us what you like, and if you run into any issues, you can also tell us that so we can get them ironed out and getting it working as best as we can. Well, let's not do that one. Let's do property. Very creative. Again, you can see that it's loading pretty aggressively, telling you that something's going on in the background, going to get the soils data, going to get the streams data, and populating that. While we're waiting, are there any questions I can answer that seem relevant?
There are quite a few questions and they're all relevant. So we'll just go
Okay.
through them one at a time and tell me when to stop. When
Okay.
you enter in your address in Landmapper, does it pull up all the property in your name in the area? So it doesn't go to you at all. It just goes to by the address, right?
That's exactly right. Yes. Thanks, Mike. So it doesn't know who owns what, but it does know where you're trying to get to. So you'll be brought to the general area and then you'll be responsible for saying, yes, that one's mine. That property is mine.
Here's another one that I know David already answered in chat, but I don't know if everyone saw it. I'm trying to map in Washington. Property tax lots are not coming up. Is this Oregon only software?
Oh, yes, we should have started with that. It is Oregon only software at this point. We are looking to expand, but very, very good question. We're in Oregon only at this point in time.
All right, the rest, there's a whole bunch. We'll just wait, but
Okay, I just have one more short thing and then I'll stop screen sharing and we can do kind of a question and answer session. So just quickly, this is the PDF that was created when I clicked that download all maps button. Essentially, it's the exact same thing. It's got all the same data, all the same maps, but it's just something that you can print on your computer or that you can send to your brother or your daughter or whoever you want to share these maps with. And it's a little bit more portable than the online version. But like I said, it's the exact same thing. And it's kind of fun to look at all the different, I just go here and check out all the different types of properties, but I'm definitely a map nerd. So that's all there is as far, it's a super simple application. If you ever get stuck and you just want to start over, you can always just go home or you can click on this Landmapper application and you're right back where you were, enter another property and press go. Those are essentially the only bits of information that you need to know and I'll get you mapping at that point. So yeah, let's jump into some questions.
all right. This is from Lion Waxman. To what level of precision and resolution does the topography go to?
Great question. So like I said, right now we're doing meters. Each of these is 20 meters. So I hope that answers your question. Each of these are 20 meter lines. When we do feet, I believe they will also be 20 feet. But maybe don't quote me on that.
Yeah. And the data source is USGS for that?
The ones that we will be using that are in feet are USGS. This one right here is from Mapbox. And it's a publicly available sourced data set, pre-made. Yeah.
So there are two water legends. Please explain.
I believe you're talking about the streams layer. So essentially what this is, there's a lot of combinations. There's two categories. There's size and there's type. So the first bit of information here is the size of your stream or water body. Like I said, Oregon has specific requirements for how you can manage your forest around streams. And part of that requirement is knowing the size. So some small streams have different requirements than large ones. The other type of information that you need to know is whether it's fish bearing, whether it's related to drinking water. SSBT is salmon, steelhead, bull trout, I believe.
Correct.
Those are, there's some extra requirements that go with those streams within the last 10 years, I think last 5 even.
So what's the
And I
difference
love
between-
it that there's a little typo on this PDF. that I didn't notice before. I don't believe it's on this part, but this should be non-fish. So it's not any of the drinking fish or SSBT.
Perfect.
There we go.
I think that was a question. What's the difference between the blue large drinking and the gray large drinking?
Oh, yeah.
The grays are
It's called
non-fish.
a typo.
That's easy to do. Okay. So if you can tell the soil type, can you also tell if there is water under the soil as an underground stream?
I might let David, the soil expert, jump in on this one and see if he has any suggestions about that.
Can you repeat the question?
Oh, yeah. Mike, can you repeat the question?
Oh, yes, sir. If you can, yes, ma'am. If you can tell the soil type, can you also tell if there is water under the soil as in an underground stream?
I don't think the soil survey does capture that specific attribute. So all of these data are being pulled from the NRCS soil survey. And so they have hundreds of different attributes that are populated for each soil map unit, they call them. There's a related question coming from Sean Colley right now. Is this pulled from Web Soil Survey? It's pulled from the same data set that sits behind the Web Soil Survey. So we essentially downloaded the data that the Web Soil Survey displays for the state of Oregon and are serving it ourselves because we were running into a lot of difficulty actually getting the NRCS website to work. It was breaking a lot when we were asking for it. So back to the underground streams data. I don't think the soil survey includes a specific attribute like that, but there are a variety of other things that we could potentially include. One suggestion we got already in the comments was about site index. We do have it here on some of the soil types where it's available. So if the soil survey, for example, includes this is a Douglas fir site index.
100-year.
And that looks like 100-year. Yeah.
100-year.
So I'm not
age.
sure whether or not it's mixing up. In some places it might be using 50-year. Sarah, I don't know if you recall that, but basically we're kind of a lot of the things that are coming in now, questions that are coming in now and recommendations are definitely things that this is kind of the beta version, of Landmapper. So we're really looking for your feedback and advice about what other things you'd like to see mapped and put in tables. Right now, we've tried to cover the bases in terms of the minimum requirements for filling out maps and tables that go into the template forest management plan for Oregon that's accepted by Oregon Department of Forestry and Tree Farm and Forest Stewardship Council and NRCS. I think there's a lot of other things, Kenneth is asking, for example, about LiDAR, where there's a lot of cool things like that, or we had another one about hazard ratings from Dogami, which are drawn from LiDAR as well. There's a lot of additional layers that we can add, and we're going to kind of think very judiciously about how much more we add to this so that we don't end up just saying, here's 100 maps of all the cool things that we can come up with, but try to start with the things that we hear consistently people asking for. But hopefully you'll see this as kind of a starting point, and definitely encourage you to give us feedback about what works and what you'd like to see more of.
So there's one more that's a different one, and then maybe you can get to letting people try it out. This guy already did, so that's why I thought we'd ask this. I just created a map, and I did notice that the satellite imagery was different from different times, with the soil map one being the most recent, as in the past summer recent, while the others seem to be from a year ago.
It's interesting. Yeah.
But that's great that you could see the dates on them. Cool. So how do
it probably doesn't tell you the specific date. The soil map, that date that it's telling you, I think is from the soil survey. So I think that's indicating when the soil survey was updated in the fine print at the bottom of that picture that shows the soil map. I think that's what it's referring to. But yeah, like Sarah mentioned, I think this question comes up so much that we're really seriously looking at a couple paid alternatives. So we have a free version, which is something called NAPE imagery, which is flown by USDA, but it's only flown every 2 years or so. So for example, I think in Oregon, we might have imagery from 2019 So for example, if your property was hit by the fires, it's not something that would be reflected in that aerial imagery. There are paid services that we're investigating, but right now, to try to keep the costs as low as possible for us to continue to provide this for free, we're not charging you to use Landmapper or anything like that. So we're trying to use as much free and open source data as we can to make this available for as cheap and as long as possible.
Yeah, I think Mike had the right idea. We can spend some time sorting through these questions, but I thought I'd give you 5 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes to kind of give this a chance. Type in an address. If you don't own land, that's fine. You can go to Arch Cape like I did, or wherever you're interested in, and just give it a shot. And then we can come back in 5 minutes and answer your questions as they arise.
This is amazing.
Yes.
So one of the questions that came in while we're waiting is someone asked if it was zoomable. So when we look at like the topo map, can we enlarge that?
That is a great question.
I don't know
So
if zoomable is a real word, but that's.
I think
that's what
zoomable
I would say.
is exactly, we know what it is. So I think that's, you can zoom around when you're at this level. So when you're selecting your property, you can zoom in and out and say, this is my property or that's my property. But once you select your property and say go, then it's static. Then you're committed to saying this is my property.
So
And they're no longer zoomable.
then that if you had a 10-acre property, the detail of the map might look bigger than if you had a 640-acre property.
Absolutely. Let's try a little one here. Let me refresh. I think we're all hitting it at once as well, which is always fun.
We're making
I call it
Landmapper
an internet hug when a bunch of traffic goes at once. But yeah, I'm gonna give it a minute.
Okay, well, we have a couple more questions that have come in while we're waiting your minute.
Okay.
How would you contrast the maps you see on Google Earth with Landmapper in terms of how recent they are?
That's a good question that I can't speak to directly because we honestly, like I said, we don't specifically know. But I do know that they're on par with one another. They're both really big entities that are making the most current maps that they can. So I can't say for sure like this one's as new or newer. They're on par with one another.
Okay. Also, a couple of questions have come up in the chat that people, I guess we didn't give them the address to where to go. It's landmapper.ecotrust.org, correct?
Yes, that is correct. We can put it in, I'll put it in the chat right now.
The chat would be perfect. So that's someone who's looking, searching Safari and they couldn't find it. I searched Google and I did find it. So again, Google might be better than Safari. Okay, Sarah just put it in the chat. So if you all go to the chat, you should see that. Comment from Lion Waxman, the person that said about the dates, is he really didn't see dates on all of the maps. He could just see that the earthworks had been done and he recognized the different times. So that was wisdom rather than the date.
Personal knowledge.
So someone asked a question about the site index again. So the site index is used in the soil surveys. It's a measure of how tall the dominant trees are at a given age. And when they have a thing like 235, that's generally from the Douglas fir 100-year site index, which says at total age of 100, the average dominant trees were 235 feet. But if you have to really go to the published data to see, because some counties will do it one, some will do the other, and it just depends on when it was published. And again, someone says it'd be really nice to have the site data. And again, this is coming from the soils map, and having been involved in soils mapping for some soil types that are not predominantly forestry, they may not have site index data. But in most of our Western Oregon counties, the maps, soils maps that are forest soil types should have soils site index data. All right, someone else is getting a 502 bad gateway. That doesn't.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up because I too am now getting that. It's unfortunate. I do believe that I think we all just went to it at the same time and caused it a little bit of stress and overwork. Like I said, sometimes when we send everybody at once, we give it like a big internet hug, and it needs to take a moment. So unfortunately, I think we might just need to take a minute and let it get its bearings. If you're getting that, yeah, I apologize, but should be resolved in a minute or two.
Okay. Got that one. This person says, my Lynn County tax lot is at least tax lot outline is at least 5 years old and not what is currently on the assessor's site. So
Yeah.
that's.
You guys are clicking all the boxes. That's one more thing on our list. We have this list of like, that we had was like, these are our top priorities. And then just below it are like our next priorities once we are fixing it up and modifying a little bit. But yes, we have found a way to keep the tax lots up to date. In the past, we had to go to each county and connect with the GIS department, and sometimes even pay money to get the tax lot designations that we were using. And so obviously that's not something you can do every year, and it led to outdated data. That's currently what's on here now. But Superstar David has found a way to use to scrape it from the web. So we're getting the most recent tax lot boundaries that we can and aren't dependent on individual counties to supply us with that. So on the docket, and thanks for that. It kind of solidifies our need for keeping that up to date.
So here's a comment in the chat from Steve Vaught, former stewardship forester. He says the Douglas fir productivity data shown in the examples is cubic feet per acre per year, not tree height at 100 years. So they call it site, but it's really not site index. That's interesting.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Steve. We could definitely go back and fix that. I think that what you caught there is something that is really commonly used in the Forest Service, for example. Like I think 225 is the highest cubic feet per acre per year is the highest site productivity that the Forest Service uses to classify things. Our intent there is to provide the Douglas fir site index, but I think we must have just mixed up which one is being displayed there. So we can definitely get back to the data and swap out what's being displayed. Thank you for catching that.
All right.
Okay. Well, so while Landmapper is kind of scrolling itself and getting back to it, the last part of our presentation, David was going to talk us through a little bit about the additional components that we're adding to Landmapper and what the future looks like. You know, as you guys can see, this is definitely beta. Hopefully the platform seems useful to you. We worked really hard to kind of, you know, listen to what everyone has to say about what's important for their property. And yeah, I appreciate you bearing with us as we tweak and clean it up as we go. Like I said, we're going to be posting a survey link that you guys can go to and give us feedback. Let us know what you like and let us know what's not working for you. And that will be integrated as we move forward. But I think for now, if we want to jump over to David and he can tell us what's the future.
You want me to share those slides, David?
Yeah, please.
Can you see them?
So I wanted to let you all know that this is just the beginning. So the work that we're showing you right now, with the Landmapper app, has been supported by the Oregon Conservation Innovation Grant from Oregon Natural Resources Conservation Service. So that's why it's just Oregon right now, because this was an Oregon conservation grant. We did recently receive a new grant called the SARE grant. This is from a USDA group, and it just got started this year. And one of the things that we're trying to do with this as well is to build on the backbone of Landmapper to try to add additional things like forest type maps. That's the real the kind of light at the end, or pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that we're working towards, is trying to come up with a first guess of what the basic forest types are on your property. So we've just started out with this now, and we've got partners from Wallowa Resources and University of Washington and Northwest Natural Resources Group that are involved in this. I see some of the panelists or some of the participants in this webinar are also part of the advisory team that we have. If you go to the next slide, Mike, I can show you some of the folks that are involved right now. So we have the team from Ecotrust, which includes the kind of data and forestry folks like me and Sara, as well as our design and software engineering team. Northwest Natural Resources Group is another nonprofit organization based in Southwest Washington. That many of you may be familiar with. And then we've got Wallowa Resources, a community-based organization in Northeastern Oregon. And Greg Edel is the guy that manages the University of Washington's forests. They've got about 5,000 acres up there. And Jasmine Brown is a PhD student at Michigan State University. All of these folks are part of the project team. So we're actually doing a lot of the kind of day-to-day work of actually getting to the next steps of not just thinking about making maps, but also trying to figure out where there are gaps in stewardship planning resources right now that might be served by web applications. If you go to the next slide as well, we have an advisory team who's guiding the work that we do. And so these folks are all scattered across Oregon and Washington, and include, George, Lynn, and Ben at the top here are family forest owners. Ben also does consulting forestry as well. Colin and Steve are tribal foresters. Sherry runs the forestry program for the Columbia Land Trust. Andrew and Nate are with NRCS and ODF respectively. And then Lauren Grand is an OSU extension forester. So we've brought this kind of brain trust of folks in that can help guide us as we start to navigate a variety of different efforts. So, our goal here is to kind of build on the great work that's already being done. So if you're in the Northeast, you might, Northeastern Oregon, you might have interacted with folks that are doing My Blue Mountains Woodlands. If you're in Southern Oregon, you might have interacted with the folks that are doing My Southern Oregon Woodlands, for example. And then the Oregon Tree Farm system is also looking at developing something that supports building on a concept that they call the landscape management plan. So basically kind of providing simple recommendations that can help folks get further down the stewardship planning path. So we're, over the next 3 years, going to be taking kind of a broader look from just generating maps to also thinking about what other types of information and referrals, for example, can we make to help those of you who are starting off in a stewardship planning figure out where to go for the next step. So some of that will involve maps, and some of it will involve getting you in touch with your extension agents or stewardship foresters or things like that. So just want you to know that we're aware, of a lot of these other initiatives that are going on, and we're going to be doing outreach and focus groups and interviews to try to think more broadly than just generating maps about the different things that we could be doing in the future. So that's it for now. I think we'd love to get your feedback. And Sarah, I don't know if you have the link for giving us feedback. A lot of you have been putting comments in the Q&A, and we can use that as well. We also have a form that you can go to once you've had a chance to play with Landmapper and tell us what worked and didn't work. But before you do that, I want to make sure that you take the opportunity to fill out the poll, the last poll that we have, the Zoom poll, Mike, that
Yep.
we can run. You can tell us what you thought about this presentation.
Right. So I will launch this, and I won't review the answers to it, but just go ahead and complete it. And once you complete it, it'll go away. And then you can be happy because you've done your poll. Couple more questions, and I will just keep on going while we're doing this. Someone says, seeing the geology overlay of the land would be interesting and helpful. And I guess I would say there that if you do have the soils type and you go to the web soil survey, you can get down to what the geology is. So that should be pretty easy to do, I think. And then someone else says, this is Allison, she says, hi, Sarah, but she also says, this is an excellent tool. Could you explain or direct us to more information about soil types and depths to soil restrictive layer? What do they mean?
Yeah, so like David was saying, those are all pulled from the web soil survey. I can also put the link to that in the chat here. I'm pulling together a whole bunch of links, so just give me 1 minute. But yeah, so like David was saying, there's so much information. There's hundreds of different attributes that have to do with soil, horizons, so like different layers. And so there's a lot to learn as far as soils go. But they do a pretty good job of giving you information about what each of these attributes mean. So I'll click that and I'll put that in the chat here so you can check that out. I think as we're working more with our partners, including the Tree Farm and Small Woodland Association, we're trying to kind of see how this fits into creating a forest management plan where it's more of a resource as well. So in addition to maps, it's like, okay, so I know what my soil type is, but what does that mean, right? So it's kind of tying together, like this is the info, and then what do you do with that info? In addition to the work that David was saying, we are partnering with them moving forward to kind of to make that a learning experience. So it's like learn about your property, but then also learn like the so what, like what does this mean? And so Allison, I think that question really points to like the usefulness of like not only knowing what's on your property, but finding resources for learning more about what that means. So I'll link that now, but just know that that's something that's on the horizon as well.
All right, someone's frustrated because they can't open Landmapper. So once we're all done and go off of this, you should have better luck. One more thing while we're waiting for more questions, because I know since we're pretty much at the ending point, people are going to be leaving. And as I said earlier, this is a every other week show, and we do have one next week because we're in the odd one. So I'm going to post this and we'll still be able to do Q&A. But next Tuesday, 1 week from today at 3 p.m., we have Brad with her Robinson, Glenn Ahrens, and Amanda Rao, all from OSU Extension, talking about managing your forest with fire in mind. And that'll be at 3 o'clock on Tuesday, December 15th. And Amanda is a new hire of the Extension. She's part of the Extension Fire Program. She's a regional specialist covering the Willamette Valley, and she used to be with the Nature Conservancy. So really sharp gal, really smart. You may have known her as Amanda Stamper too. You may have heard of that name. And of course, Glenn Ahrens is the Clackamas and Hood River and Marion County Extension Forester, and Brad Ruther Robinson is Benton, Lynn, and Polk Extension Forester. So tune in next week and you will enjoy those guys. You just go to either this Beeves /Tree School online or Know Your Forest, and it'll take you right to the opportunity to register. So magically, why that was happening, 2 more questions came in. Do you have a suggestion for a website that maps features on one's properties? I would like to identify stands and special features. That's a tough order.
It is. So I think right now it depends. A lot of this depends on what you want to do with it. You know, do you want to draw these maps and then add them to another map, for example? I'd encourage you to chat with your extension forester or a stewardship forester, ODF stewardship forester, to try to figure out which specific tool is going to be the best for you. I will say if you're not using a desktop geographic information system software, or not really eager to kind of learn how to use new software packages like that, Google does have something called My Maps, which I've found pretty easy to use. You can also do similar things in Google Earth. But you know, it kind of depends on whether or not you're going to want to just look at it in that map, or whether you want to take it and do something else with it or hand it off to someone else. So I hope that's a good place to start. But yeah, like most things, I think what we're expecting here with Landmapper is that it's not going to replace foresters anytime soon. You're still going to want and need to talk to extension foresters and stewardship foresters and consulting foresters. The hope here is just that you and they could spend a little bit less time just going to a bunch of different websites and gathering maps.
So another software that I've used, David, that I haven't used for a while, and it doesn't seem to me to be as advanced as this, is called My Land Plan by American Forest Foundation. And it had some of this, but it didn't quite have as much as this.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we're going to be navigating going forward. Was My Land Plan is an application that initially, when they started developing it in Oregon, they were planning to allow you to draw your own points and lines and, you know, make notes on maps and things like that, kind of keep a diary of what was going on. And the goal that they were working towards was to try to auto-populate a management plan. Like as you were interacting with the website, it was auto-populating your stewardship plan for you with the answers that you gave to it. And American Forest Foundation is not continuing to develop that particular Oregon version. They made that decision maybe 4 or 5 years ago, maybe more like 3 years ago, now that I think about it. So that definitely is one of the reasons that we've started to step in to this. Initially, when that was going on, we thought American Forest Foundation has got it covered. We don't need to worry about that. And I think the close ties that we have with a lot of the regional and state organizations here will hopefully make it a little bit more likely that we can develop and maintain an application like this into the future.
Excellent. So I have 2 more questions, and this one is an announcement from Jim James. Please announce that OSWA and OTFS will host an event on Thursday, July 22nd in Springfield about using Landmapper in conjunction with the Oregon Uniform Forest Management Planning Tool as part of the Oregon Family Forest Convention. July 22nd to 24th. Information will be available on OSWA's website. So this really is taking the next step. And my question then is to take the step back. How does this tie in with Forest Planner, or does it? If I do all this stuff in Landmapper, but then I want to go into Forest Planner to talk about scenario planning, do I have to recreate the wheel, or will this transfer over?
So right now, these are the tools don't talk to each other. However, I did reply to another person and mention that behind the scenes they're using the same database. So if that doesn't mean anything to you, don't worry about it. But basically, they're speaking the same language. So down the road, I think we would be very interested in making a seamless transition where, if you're kind of starting off down the stewardship planning pathway and just gathering information about what the current conditions are, then Landmapper may be the right place to start. When you're ready to start figuring out, well, here's the different management systems that I'm, you know, interested in exploring, seeing how they, so Forest Planner will tell you things like, what's the timber output, or the harvest cost, or harvest revenue, or fire risk, or carbon storage. You know, it goes much more into detail about, you select a silvicultural system that you want to apply, and it tells you what we think it'll do. So down the road, you know, we kind of see this as a stepping stone to helping landowners do more informed planning. But there's definitely still a stage in there of, you know, with Forest Planner, what we saw, for example, was that for landowners that don't know what silviculture is, choosing different silvicultural systems is a lot, you know, and so knowing what commercial thinning is or pre-commercial thinning is, you know, if you're not ready for that, you'll be ready soon. Talk to a forester. You know, it's a lot of these things are not particularly complicated. It's just a lot of new vocabulary. So in the future, there's lots of cool things that we can do. So definitely, Sarah, I don't know if you've put that form, the link to the Google form in here. Yeah, I'll paste it again in there. That's exactly the kind of thing that we would love to get feedback from everybody on, of just what is the future that you could imagine. I'm pasting this link again here. So if you go and fill out that form, it should give us feedback about anything that you want to see.
I just want to jump in. I just got a message from our developer who noticed that we did give it a hug and the server went down. So he's re-uploading on a bigger server. It'll take about 10 minutes to get it back up, but in about 10 minutes, should be back and running on a more powerful server. So give it all your love. Just wanted to give you that update.
We stress the system, folks. This is
yeah.
This is
good problem to have. Yeah.
Not a bad problem.
So
yeah.
I'll just, before I go into any more questions or anything, just stress that David and Sarah posted some really good stuff in the chat, and so has Dan Stark and Jim Cathcart posted a link for my land plan and some more information. So please check that all out. I will, when we're done here, I will leave it up and running so you can have access to the chat, because I always find it's really frustrating. As soon as I start looking at the chat, they shut down the webinar and I don't have it anymore. So all those things in the chat, you can also copy and paste like into a Word document or something, so that they won't go away when the webinar is over.
So that was the wrong link. Clearly, I did that quickly on the fly. So I'm going to post the right link to the survey right now.
Thank you,
Well,
Nancy.
it looks like several folks have already taken the initiative, you know, to
Yeah.
starting to add suggestions in that Google spreadsheet. So we'll definitely take those. We're not going to throw that feedback away. But Sarah will be adding a link to give it a more structured feedback. We'll ask you about each map, you know, and whether you were able to download the maps and things like that.
So we did have one question that we didn't answer, but maybe you typed it, and it was, do any of the maps show designated wetlands?
So right now, I think we're just showing the streams from ODF, but we certainly can add the wetlands, wetland areas as well.
Since depending on the size, there's forest practices implications.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So the question we got earlier about SSBT is in this kind of same family. So, you know, with wetland areas, depending on the size of the wetland and the type of the stream, for example, Oregon forest practices rules are going to have different regulations about what you can do, you know, particularly how intensively you can manage close to sensitive areas like wetlands and particularly fish-bearing streams, but also streams that provide drinking water and things like that as well.
All right. Well, thank you both very much. This is fascinating. And I'm so happy that you guys are taking the initiative, not only to do this great work, but to go out and get things like the SARE grant to make it bigger and better. Because I think this is the future of forest management, without a doubt. So I'm going to say goodbye. I'm going to leave the webinar up so people can access the chat, because whatever you say in the chat we will get it, even if you don't all see it once we go away. The chat thing is saved. And also to let you know that since you registered for this webinar, we know who you are, and we won't sell you anything, but we may want to do a survey. So just be pre-warned, and tune in next week and learn about fire. So thank you all. And thank you, David. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Mike, for hosting. Appreciate it.
All right. My pleasure.
Yeah, thank you all.
And Dan for doing the chat. Thanks all.
Yeah, Dan. Thank you, Dan.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody.